House of the Dragon, the story of the Dance of the Dragons, the Grand Civil War of the Targaryens, second season, has finally come to an end, and man, what a blue balls ending it was. I mean, these mother yuccas knew exactly what they were doing. They've been building up to this grand war, these many multiple battles between the Greens and the Blacks for like all season now. And what did they do in the season 2 finale? But they hit us with this epic montage, but just leave us on a complete cliffhanger. Oopsie, did I do that? I guess you're just gonna have to wait 2 more years now to get your House of the Dragons fixed now, sonny. All jokes aside, I really do love House of the Dragons. It's an absolutely amazing show filled with amazing actors telling an amazing, massive story. Today, though, I just want to talk about like one facet of that story, as in the season 2 finale, we finally saw the culmination of Daemon Targaryen's arc. Yup, that's right, Daemon's final vision scene. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to Finn Films. Join me today as I explain every single thing that we saw that happened in Daemon's final vision scene in the season 2 finale, from the three-eyed crow to Daenerys Targaryen and everything else in between. So, just a note guys, before we start this video, obviously this is going to contain spoilers for Season 2 of House of the Dragon, as well as potential spoilers, likely spoilers for later seasons of House of the Dragons and Game of Thrones as a whole, as it's basically impossible to discuss this last Daemon vision scene specifically without invoking spoilers. So consider yourself warned. So throughout season 2 of House of the Dragon, my favorite character, Daemon Targaryen, has been, well, my boy's been off the perk. Daemon, as we know, early on in season 2, has a little fallout with his niece, wife, Rhaenyra Targaryen, and decides to take a little vacation to the dreary giant castle of Harrenhal. My boy Daemon taking that basically single-handedly like the Giga Chad that he is. From here, though, things start to get a bit sus for our boy Daemon. Someone must have slipped him some LSD into his drink because, man, my boy Daemon is seeing all sorts of weird shit. From visions of his dead wife to seeing himself as his nephew Aemon Targaryen, Aemon One-Eye. My dude is even having some weird Oedipus complex type dreams where he gets it on with his own mom.
You have a poison in your mind, and the fact that you can't see it makes me so sad.
So then what exactly is going on here with Daemon and all of these dreams and visions? Are these dreams and visions truly caused by the curse of Harren the Black, the man who built Harrenhal by chopping down a werewood forest that is giving Daemon these crazy dreams and visions? Maybe, even with season 2 concluded, the answer to this question is still not completely obvious. I did a whole video a couple of weeks ago delving into the many theories around the source of Daemon's dreams and visions, and even with season 2 finished, to me it seems like this answer is most likely a combination of all of these theories kind of rolled into one. First, we know that Harrenhal is considered cursed by many people in the Riverlands and in Westeros as a whole because, like I said, Harren the Black felled a forest of werewood trees in the building of this castle, this supposedly angering the old gods and the children of the forest, cursing the castle. If you didn't know, werewood trees are considered sacred to the followers of the old gods in Westeros and the children of the forest, believing that these trees themselves are gods. As well, we know from Game of Thrones lore and the book series that these trees can be used by green seers to see visions of the future and the past when looking through the eyes of the tree. Again, think back to Game of Thrones, whether it's the show or the book series, with characters like Bran Stark and the three-eyed crow. So then we know that the werewoods do have some sort of like magical powers, some sort of mystical powers in the world of Westeros, so Daemon's dreams could be explained by, yes, this curse of Harrenhal from the felling of the werewood trees. Another explanation is we know that Daemon's bed in Harrenhal is made of werewood, which is also possibly contributing to these dreams and visions, as we learn from Alice Rivers in the show House of the Dragons. As well, there is another separate reference and account of a character receiving strange prophetic-like dreams when they fall asleep on a werewood tree, specifically Jaime Lannister, where Jaime receives a prophetic-like vision in a storm of swords after sleeping on a werewood tree and leaving Harrenhal. And finally, there is the theory that it is Alice Rivers herself, a character surrounded in mystery that many people believe is a magic user herself, that is giving Daemon these visions, specifically by putting werewood paste in his drinks, as werewood paste has been shown in Game of Thrones to induce these types of like green seeing abilities and these types of like prophetic visions and dreams, as we see in the case of Bran and the Three-Eyed Crow again. To me, most likely, it is a combination of kind of all of these things together, as it does very much seem like Alice Rivers is very aware of what is happening to Daemon and seems to be taking an active role in causing Daemon's visions and dreams to happen. The question then is, why? Well, this answer, I believed, is revealed to us, and it is revealed in the Season 2 finale of House of the Dragons, but also through examining the many visions that Daemon has received throughout the course of Season 2 in Harrenhal. Daemon, you see, is a character that embodies the trope of the second son, a trope that George R. R. Martin loves to use in his writings in Game of Thrones. The second son in a society that follows succession being kind of viewed as a backup plan should the first son die or fail to produce a male heir of their own, then the second son would ascend to the throne. Throughout Game of Thrones in Westeros, we've seen many examples of this archetype of the second son, an archetype that George very much loves to use, oftentimes George kind of creating this second son to be much more competent than their elder brother. In many ways, they are much more fit to rule than their elder brother, but because of the law of succession, they never actually get that opportunity to rule, because as soon as their elder brother has a male heir, they're basically any chance of that they have to ultimately rule and to gain power completely vanishes. In House of the Dragons, Daemon and his nephew Aemond are two pretty good examples of this character archetype, as both are strong warriors, dragon riders, and in many ways are more competent than their elder brothers. But this definitely probably holds more true for Aemond and his relationship to his elder brother Aegon than it does to Daemon. Though we do know that Daemon throughout our series definitely feels as though he should have been the one to rule, and believes that he is much more fit to rule than his brother Viserys. Daemon believing that Viserys, his elder brother, is a weak man. This is really kind of the core theme of Daemon's visions and dreams throughout Season 2, Daemon's lust for the Iron Throne, his coveting of his brother's crown, and his anger at his niece, wife, Rhaenyra, for being named heir in his stead. In his mind, Rhaenyra stealing from him what he believes is rightfully his, the crown. Throughout Season 2, we see Daemon constantly flirt with this idea of claiming the crown and the throne for himself, Daemon constantly referring to himself as king, and even going as far to say that him and Rhaenyra would rule the kingdom as equals. Daemon's own ambitions and actions throughout our series so far, constantly putting Rhaenyra's cause into jeopardy. Specifically, we see in Episode 1 of Season 2 of House of the Dragon, with Daemon's revenge plot involving blood and cheese, this plot going wrong, leading to the death of Aegon's youngest son instead of the initial target, Aemond One-Eye, as well as Daemon's handling of the River Lords and ultimately his brutal ideas to win them over to the black side. Most of Daemon's visions are references to Daemon's coveting of this throne. For example, Daemon's visions of a young Rhaenyra, Daemon even cutting her head off in one of them, as again he feels this anger and insecurity that his brother named her heir instead of him. The many visions of him and his brother, King Viserys, Viserys going even as far as to offer Daemon the crown in the last vision he has of him, and most obviously of all, the strange Oedipus-like vision that Daemon has with his own mother, who tells Daemon that he was always her favorite son, and that he was meant to rule, not his elder brother Viserys. However, it's unlikely that Daemon's mother, Alyssa Targaryen, actually did feel this way, as she would die in 84 AC after the Conquering when Daemon was just a young child, no older than 2 or 3 years old. So Daemon never actually really knew his mother. So to me, it very much seems like the true motive of Daemon's vision, the true message that they are trying to get him to realize, is the error of his ambition and the ultimate harm that would cause to the world should he follow through on this ambition to take the throne for himself. This is really most evident in Daemon's final vision that happens in the finale of Season 2 of House of the Dragon, when Daemon reaches out, touching the werewood tree, Alice Rivers telling him, "Daemon, all your life you have sought to command your own fate, but today you are ready." Here, Daemon is shown a series of true events of the future that will take place throughout the history of Westeros. The vision opens with a series of large weirwood roots leaking out their blood-red sap, the roots combining into a small tree, where at the center of the tree sits a young silver-haired man with a birthmark the shape of a raven on his neck, connected to the tree itself. This is Brynden Rivers, better known in Game of Thrones lore in the shows as the Three-Eyed Crow, the Three-Eyed Raven, or Bloodraven, the greatest of the Greenseers. Brynden Rivers is a bastard of King Aegon IV, born in 175 AC, some 50 years post the Dance of the Dragons and the events of House of the Dragons, Brynden being a distant relative to Daemon and Rhaenyra. Brynden is a very important character in Game of Thrones lore, and in many ways, he kind of mirrors both Daemon Targaryen and Aemon Targaryen. Like Daemon, Brynden would wield the Valyrian steel sword Darksister, and like both of his distant relatives, Brynden would also fight in a Targaryen civil war, specifically the Blackfyre Rebellions, where Brynden was blinded by his rival half-brother Aegor, similar to how Aemond was blinded by his nephew Luke. Brynden would then serve as Hand of the King and Master of Whisperers for his nephew King Aerys I, and ultimately his nephew's heir, King Maekor I, though after Maekor's death, the matter of who would ultimately ascend the Iron Throne next was unclear, Brynden calling a great council to settle the matter of the succession of the Iron Throne. Here, Brynden would arrest Aenys Blackfyre, the fifth son of Daemon Blackfyre, the man who began the Blackfyre Rebellions. After Brynden had promised Aenys that he could come and participate in the council peacefully, Aenys ultimately would be beheaded in the Red Keep. Brynden argued that he sacrificed his honor to protect the realm from a potential usurper, ultimately Brynden being sent to the Wall for his crimes. Here, Brynden Rivers, aka Bloodraven, would serve the Night's Watch, ultimately being elected as their commander in 239 AC. However, Brynden would disappear later in 252 AC while ranging beyond the Wall, never to be seen again. Presumably, this is where he found the Great Weirwood Net, Brynden eventually joining himself to the Weirwoods, becoming the Three-Eyed Crow, the last of the Greenseers. Bloodraven is a character that is surrounded by mystery in Game of Thrones lore. We've barely even touched the surface for this character in this video, as there's all sorts of speculation and theories surrounding Bloodraven, Brynden Rivers, many people believing that this character manipulated a lot of the events that occurred during Game of Thrones and is kind of the puppeteer master behind the scenes, using his visions and sending dreams to people all throughout Westeros, but really that's just a theory. A creepy tree man theory. Next, in Daemon's visions, we are taken through the point of view of a werewolf running through the snowy forest on the other side of the Wall, where we see a White and the others, the White Walkers, marching onto the Wall. This is important because, as we know, the White Walkers are ultimately the great threat to Westeros that kind of loom in the background during Game of Thrones. While men ultimately squabble over who will rule Westeros and sit the Iron Throne, there exists a greater, more existential threat beyond the Wall, the threat of winter and the descent of the White Walkers onto the Seven Kingdoms. If we remember, this is why the Wall of Ice was ultimately constructed a long time ago, in order to keep this great evil from returning to Westeros once again. But by the time of Game of Thrones, the White Walkers, the others, are just thought of as a scary bedtime story. As well, this relates to Aegon the Conqueror's dream, a song of ice and fire, as according to House of the Dragons, the show, Aegon had a prophetic dream of a great evil that would come to Westeros, and that in order for the realm to stand against this evil, a Targaryen would need to sit the Iron Throne in order to unite men against it. This evil, as we know, being the others, the White Walkers, and this prophecy being a kind of long-running story thread that really permeates both House of the Dragons and Game of Thrones, linking the two series together, specifically through Dany and Jon's stories. From here, we are taken to a bloody battlefield filled with the bodies of dead dragons and dead men. This is the fallout of the Dance of the Dragons, as the Dance of the Dragons would ultimately lead to thousands upon thousands of men dead by the time it had concluded, as well as the deaths of majority of the adult dragons in our story in the world, ultimately leading to the extinction of dragons in the world of Westeros as we know it. In his vision, Daemon walks through this battlefield, stepping into a pool of blood and water, which transitions to him falling beneath a great body of water as we watch Daemon descend and drown. This vision is surprisingly a reference to Daemon's death in the Dance of the Dragon, as Daemon would fight Aemon above the God's Eye, the Great Lake outside of Harrenhal. It was said that Daemon on Caraxes would arrive at Harrenhal to face his nephew on his great dragon Vhagar. According to the story, Daemon's dragon Caraxes would bite Vhagar on the neck, allowing Daemon to leap from his dragon, plunging his Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister into his nephew's eye. Both men tumbling from their dragons to the God's Eye below, where it is presumed that they both died along with both of their dragons. I gotta say that this is like a pretty ballsy move from the showrunners, basically straight up teasing Daemon's death in this vision, but I guess to be fair to them, if you didn't know any of the story of the Dance of the Dragons, this would probably completely go over your head. From here, we see a great red comet, this comet appearing in the sky of Westeros and Essos in 299 AC. This comet is pretty important to the story of Game of Thrones, many people throughout our story drawing a ton of different meanings from said comet, some of them believing that it is an omen of war, others believing it foretells doom and destruction, the red piece Melisandre believing it is a herald for the prophecy of Azor Ahai, or the prince that was promised, a reference to the last hero who lived during the Long Night and helped to defeat the others, but probably and most notably of all, many people believing that this comet is a reference to dragons, Asha telling Bran that this comet means fire and blood, while Old Nan says it represents dragons. Daenerys Targaryen herself believing that this comet is a heralding of her coming back to Westeros, Daenerys believing that this comet was a sign to light the funeral pyre for her husband Khal Drogo, the fire ultimately being the thing that birthed her dragons back into the world of Westeros. And to me, this is likely what the vision is referencing, as the comet flashes and we see a vision of 3 dragon eggs on light and fire, these being Dany's dragon eggs, as the scene transitions to the birth of Dany's 3 dragons in the season finale of season 1 of Game of Thrones, the first dragons to be born in the world for over 150 years. Dany obviously being a Targaryen and a distant relative of both Daemon and Rhaenyra. From here, Daemon's vision transitions to the throne room, where he sees his niece, wife Rhaenyra, sitting in the Iron Throne, the room going black as Daemon turns, seeing his other niece, Aelena Targaryen, who tells him, "It's all a story, and you are one part of it. You know your part." As Daemon returns from the vision back to reality, Daemon a completely changed man. Real quick, I saw a lot of people were confused online why Aelena was in these visions. Well, that's because the show has portrayed Aelena as a dragon dreamer, one of many Targaryens throughout our stories that has received prophetic dreams, oftentimes dreaming of dragons, hence all those kind of weird Aelena scenes that we got in season 1 of House of the Dragons, where Aelena basically completely predicts and spells out the entire war of the Greens and the Blacks that is to come. As I said, this vision has a profound effect on Daemon and his character, Daemon later affirming his loyalty to Rhaenyra, telling her that he has seen what is to come. He has seen the war that is just beginning, that winter is coming with darkness and doom looming. Daemon obviously referring to the White Walkers here. Daemon, as we see throughout all of his visions, but specifically the last vision, being granted a greater perspective, a perspective of the darkness that is to come some 200 years later, and that their actions are but one chapter of this greater story, this story against winter, this story of ice and fire. And ultimately, this was the point of Daemon's visions in Season 2, to show him his shortcomings as a person, as a character, and his self-ambition, and to ultimately give him more perspective on the greater events that are to come, so that he can see his part to play in the Song of Ice and Fire. And honestly, I absolutely loved this. I am a really big fan of what they've done with Daemon's character and how they further fleshed out his story in House of the Dragon, and how they added all of these vision scenes to it, and how it links House of the Dragon with Game of Thrones as a whole, and kind of ties the two aspects of the story together, and really kind of how it interlaces all of these many different aspects of Game of Thrones lore, from the Cat's Paw Dagger to King Aegon the Conqueror's dream of ice and fire, the White Walkers, Dany, Bloodraven, all of it. I think it's great, and I think it's a really good example of how House of the Dragon has kind of learned from the mistakes of the final seasons of Game of Thrones, the show, when they decide to kind of make creative changes, to take creative liberties to our story, to go off source material. But of course, it also really helps that a lot of this was George's idea to begin with, right? And yes, this was the final vision of Daemon Targaryen explained. I know we went through a lot of Game of Thrones lore there, so if you did manage to make it to the end of this video, big shout outs to you. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this vision scene and Daemon's storyline really as a whole in Season 2. Personally, I absolutely loved it. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to help support me, and it really does help in putting this video into the algorithm. As well, if you did enjoy this video, then why don't you check out some of my other House of the Dragons content that is on screen now, like my full breakdown for the Season 2 finale of House of the Dragons. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, adu.